Hi everyone, I'm Corion, your witch in residence. And I would love to be able to string together words that rhyme with V like they did in V for Vendetta for this opening, but I am nowhere near capable of doing that. Before we do get into V for Vendetta, though, I do just want to comment that I am running a drive to 1,000 here on my channel. Whoever is the 1,000th subscriber, I will contact them. If they were referred by a friend or a person who is a member of this channel, I will contact them, and both of them will be receiving a prize pack from me just as soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers. So please, guys, get out there, share, build up the channel. It helps me to get monetized, and when I get monetized, I can put more resources towards the channel, which means more fun with you guys. So give it a like, give it a share, give it a subscribe. Shout it from the rooftops if you need to. Whatever needs to happen, let's get this done. Now, with that in mind, let's dig into V for Vendetta and censorship. Now, I know a lot of the people that watch this channel are in the US. And in the US, you guys have hard and serious rules about free speech. And in other parts of the world, there are certain limits on speech because, they feel that certain types of speech shouldn't be protected. I will be the first to say I am not a free speech absolutist. I believe that there are some things that we shouldn't necessarily say to others. For example, yelling fire in a crowded theater, or walking into an Apple store and yelling, Siri, delete all content and settings, confirm, would cause a panic and would cause disruption to people's lives. And I'm not a huge fan of that. I am a huge fan of giving people information and allowing them to make their own choices and make their own decisions. And I do believe information should be free and usually presented, but I don't believe that one should use words as a weapon. I've always felt that one should do their best to present the facts, present their opinions on said facts, but not to the point where it intentionally causes harm. Okay, I am a big fan of not intentionally causing harm, but calling out, when harm occurs and providing suggestions as to its resolution. And V for Vendetta does bring up interesting discussions on censorship and why it's dangerous and why it's concerning. This book was written during the Margaret Thatcher era in the UK, where they were actually very, very concerned about significant government overreach and significant government control and censorship about what they were allowed to have in their lives and in their homes and who was going to be permitted to be free. And, I know we think sometimes that, well, these things don't really affect me. So what if people who are gay don't have the same rights I do to love who they want and to marry who they want or what have you? It doesn't concern me. But you know what it does? Because every time a choice is censored, every time a freedom is taken away, it is another link in the chain that eventually binds us all. Okay? I am a huge fan of everybody having the same rights, and those rights starting from a place of, so long as it isn't harming yourself or others, then go for it. Okay? Now, we have to determine as a society what we consider harm, and I do think that is an important discussion. I think that is something that should be continuously discussed and needs to be discussed in a respectful manner. I know that these sort of discussions can be very emotionally charged at times, right? I mean, let's be honest. If we weren't impassioned about the things we care about, then, we wouldn't care about them, right? I mean, that seems obvious to everyone. The truth of the matter is, though, we have to, in our impassioned pleas, we have to still remain respectful. It gets us if we attack the other person as opposed to the issue, we are no longer attempting to make our point and have everyone come to a reasonable conclusion. We are attempting to do harm to limit harm. And that really doesn't work. Okay? There are very rare times where using harm to solve a harmful situation will work. And those require very tempered and very careful responses. And I don't think on a day-to-day basis we need to focus on those scenarios. I think instead we need to focus on situations where we can have our speech and be respectful about it. Okay? The textbook example I'm going to use is gay rights, because I feel like it's a topic that we all generally have a good idea about, right? I think we can all agree that even if we don't know a gay person, we understand the concept. And we accept that these people should have the same rights you do. Because if they have different rights than you do, no one's ever going to advance in society. We should all be equal. Okay. So let's actually be equal then, right? Let's let them marry who they want, just like you're allowed to marry who you want. Let's let them, walk the streets and be in love with the people that they want. And provided they're not performing, public displays of affection that we all would find obscene, if it was, like ask yourself, if you saw a straight couple walking down the street doing that, would you be okay with it? And if the answer is no, then that's a reasonable place to be, right? I've often heard the joke that, if you want to see a bunch of naked people, you could go to a nude beach or New York Pride. And I absolutely get that, right? And while personally, I think that in a situation like New York Pride, where it's very contained and it isn't, it is a situation where you know what you're getting into. If you go down there, it might be okay. I would think that if you walk through Central Park in the Buff, a lot of people would be upset. So there's a time and place for things, right? And I guess the other piece of it is, if you're not comfortable with how somebody else is living their life, then by all means, don't live that life, right? But ultimately, your life is your own and their life is their own. And just as I don't get a say in how some other people live their life, I would appreciate that other people don't get a say in how I live mine. Unless, of course, I'm doing harm to others, which is where I feel the line should be. Now, this is always a impassioned and difficult argument to have. And I don't want it to be an argument, but I am absolutely okay with it being a debate in terms of censorship versus freedom of speech and what should be allowed and not, because I feel like we should always be debating this regardless. Wherever you stand on the lines of freedom of speech or censorship, this is a debate that should constantly be open and constantly be challenged and constantly change with the age that we are in. Because it may come in years from now that, neural link technology exists and we can read each other's thoughts. Well, what happens if you read somebody's thoughts that you didn't want to hear? What about those intrusive thoughts that we get in deep meditation where we think of horrible stuff because that's where our mind just kind of wandered to? What's that going to look like down the road, right? Those concepts that are science fiction today are going to be the reality of our grandchildren and our children, our grandchildren's grandchildren. So we need to think about this from that perspective as well. I've always felt that there's, other than, I want to call it negative acts involving young people or particularly disturbing works, should probably not be censored, or those things should be censored, but anything else should probably be open for buy on the open market and let the market decide on whether they feel that people should be reading this or not. When it comes to censorship in schools, I feel like there is definitely a logic to age restricting certain works, but not outright banning. Okay. I totally get why somebody may not want Huck Finn to be read by somebody who's not ready to understand some of the concepts in there. and why some of the words that appear in the book may be particularly distasteful to others. But once they understand that those words are not something that should be publicly used because of the hurtful connotations and that they only exist to hurt someone, they should still exist from a historical standpoint so that we know what they are, right? A textbook example of this is my school, or the school my child goes to, has told the kids about how harassment and bullying is wrong, but they failed to give examples or discuss what harassment and bullying is. So the kids now use those words to cover everything, and they've become meaningless. It wasn't until a bunch of the parents sat the kids down and defined it for the kids that they started getting an idea of what this is. And that internal censorship of ideas, that is where I feel the real danger comes from. There are definitely some things that we should never do. There are definitely some things that we should not say based on the audience that we are speaking to, because, we're just saying them to be intentionally hurtful. And I don't believe in being intentionally hurtful to anyone. I would rather try to be kind whenever possible. And I think everybody who listens to this channel would rather just choose to be kind because it's the nice thing to do. And I believe I have one of the most wonderfully hearted groups on YouTube for that. So let's discuss this. I am completely open to hearing everybody's ideas on censorship versus free speech, on the rights of the individual versus the rights of society. But I will require everybody to keep the conversation respectful. Okay, so let's put it in the comments. Let's keep it respectful. Let's keep it on the issue and not attack the people. Okay, we can disagree. We can politely disagree. We can even say, look, I really don't want to live in the world that you think that you think would be great because of XYZ reason. And that's fine. But when it starts becoming a personal attack, that's when I would shut it down. So let's try it. Let's try to have a respectful, reasonable discourse about where we as a society would like to see speech and whether we should impose certain limits or not, right? Personally, I feel the line is when you're intentionally saying something to harm someone else. If you are saying something like, the example of yelling fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire, I think is an interesting one because it really sums it up nicely. If you could say fire in a crowded theater if there was actually a fire going on and you'd be saving lives and be a hero. But if there wasn't, of course, you're a terrible human being because you're intentionally causing suffering to others. And I feel causing suffering through words is a terrible thing to do. I think words and language have this uniquely magical power about them. We're literally turning sound into thought, from thought. And, I'm even doing this over the internet. So I am literally getting the chance to inspire thoughts in the mind of someone else I have never met. And potentially, if YouTube lives long enough, I could be inspiring somebody else to think of deep and meaningful things that I would have never had the possibility to ever meet before and could be sometime in the future. And that to me is amazing and wild. And it fills me with a great deal of joy that we can pass on this knowledge to future generations. And sometimes that means I've got to go over some of the mistakes we've made in our generation. And you know what? That's okay. Because if I'm helping to inspire, if I'm helping to teach, if I am helping others to grow and learn, then I'm doing what I can to benefit people, even if some of the topics I have to speak about is hard. So let's have that discussion in the comments. I want to thank you all for listening for as long as you've done. Merry meet, merry part, merry meet again. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.